When you realize someone no longer loves you, something inside you breaks. It is a cold sound, almost like a branch in the middle of a dead forest, except you aren't the branch. You are the dead forest. The branch is only a piece of you that has already given up. You are surrounded by people walking through you, always away. You can't move with them, so you throw pieces of yourself at their feet. Hope they'll take along your keepsake, your brittle, your scent. But they don't. They step on you. Sometimes they carry you for busying, but always, inevitably, they drop you, leave you sprawled and stiff on the mossy floor. Sometimes they aim you at the furthest thing possible. Think your juju might rub on them. Fear your prickle and sting. They aim you at a squirrel or a snake. You think these things could learn to love you too. I mean, they are here, aren't they? They are feared and bite like you. They scare away the pretty things. But these creatures cannot offer you more than the darkest shadows. Some of them will use you to nest, or use you to kill other things. They will use you till they no longer need you. You begin to confuse the verbs use and love. This is when your breaking echoes into waves. The waves shake the forest floor. The floor of you shakes. Now you learn that you are not made of things that people or creatures need. You crack into a million branches, breaking. You combust into flames and lick at the sun. You realized you are a scorched earth. And you were never made for keeps.
All right. I think we should snap on that one there. Right? There you go.
Well, Mahogany Browne is the host and curator of the Friday Night Slam series at the famous New Yorican Poets Cafe. She's a Cave Canem Poetry Fellow, an author, and founder of her own publishing company called Penmanship Books. She's also released 5 records, including a live album called Shiro Roshima. And with us now is Mahogany Browne, and welcome to BK Live. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
We're going to add Proud Mama to that list as well, because we just found out during that lovely young artist is your progeny.
Yes, that's my daughter.
All right, on her way to college in Chicago.
Yes, yes, Chicago bound.
Very good, very good.
Excited.
So excited, that is exciting. So what else is exciting is this poetry series that's been ongoing here on the Stoop, which you really wrapping up Thursday? For serious? Like this is going to be
this
it?
end of the season,
Okay.
but we're coming back starting
Okay.
September.
All right.
Yeah, so you'll see us again.
Good.
And we're really, really excited. It was a trial run, just a couple of poets from Brooklyn saying we really need something here in our home, in our borough. And Elizabeth Ferrer was like, sure, let's give it a go, try it. And slowly but surely, the first one was a little slow, but the artists kept coming because they live here and they wanted to make sure that there was something that they were able to cultivate.
Yeah.
And the community just never stopped. After the first one, you had people coming up reading poems off their phone, off of grocery receipts.
Yeah.
It was lovely. So I'm excited to see it grow.
Do you think there's a resurgence in poetry and poetry slams? Has it sort of fallen off and now a whole nother generation is sort of rediscovering poetry, or has Brooklyn always just stayed at the forefront of this?
Brooklyn has always been at the forefront of poetry. When I first moved here from California, there was the Brooklyn Tea Party, and there was the Brooklyn Moon, where Mos Def and Saul Williams and people who are actors and amazing musicians and trailblazers in the field right now started. That's where they were beginning. That was their garden. That's how they grew all of that art.
Right.
And while those spaces are no longer operating for poets specifically, the scene never stopped growing. It just, the roots deepened and they went outside. They went to Manhattan, they went to California, went to Atlanta, and it's still happening, it's still going on. There's a National Poetry Convention every year for youth, college, and adults, and it pulls over 5,000-6,000 people, over 200 poets performing, and then of course we're introducing new poets to themselves, so.
So this isn't like your great-grandfather's poetry where like certain people of a certain age can like rattle off Robert Frost to you, or even more contemporary like Gwendolyn Brooks, things we learned in grade school where it was sort of this rote thing. So what about that evolution of poetry, and how does a person make their words into their living in a space in 2015?
Okay, that was hard. That was 2.
She's listening. That's the first step.
So the first question was, it's
That
not your
evolution.
normal poet,
Right.
And it's not. I grew up thinking Keats, Shakespeare, and Frost were the only types of poetry
Right.
that were valid. And through poetry here in New York City, where I started doing it more professionally, I became a professional artist in 2001.
Yeah.
I learned that all voices are valid. So you have Etheridge Knight, you have Gwendolyn Brooks, you have Lucille Clifton, you have Iceberg Slim, all poetry, right? So you learn that life is poetry and that all of our voices are valid. Zora Neale Hurston showed you that you use your native tongue and that is the correct tongue. So that's how I found poetry to be more relevant to me and sustaining. When you're telling your story, no one else is allowed to tell your story. No one else is allowed to tell your pain because you can speak for yourself. And that's where poetry evolved for me.
But how did your poetry evolve into penmanship books?
So I was touring Europe about 2 to 3 times a year from 2002 to 2007. And I only had chapbooks, like handmade books, and you know, real cute. I mean, I thought they were fly. And people bought them, and we had started to really grow our name and our art. So we were performing in, I say we, myself and Jive Poetic, who is the DJ for the Brooklyn Slam here. We were touring as poets, and we were creating CDs in our laptops, you know, that were old school, burn it. This is before SoundCloud, what have you. And making books by hand, and a man came up to me after doing like a 600-seater theater, opera house in Europe, and says, "Do you have a proper book?" And I said, "It's proper, it's got numbers, what you mean?" And he said, "Well, I want to put it in the library at school, but we need a barcode, you need a bind." And he said, "Your art deserves to be in libraries." And he said that, and that was it. So I came home and I sent out like a lot of queries about, manuscript publishing, and no one was interested. I was told poetry doesn't sell. I was told I don't have a, what they say, what's that word again? He said, "Oh, you don't have an audience." And I said, "Well, I just spoke to over 700 people in one night."
After which they ask, "Where can I buy the book?"
And we want to put it in our library, but I don't have an audience.
Right, but I don't have an audience. So then I just, I looked into myself a little deep, and I remember Jessica Care-Moore, a New Yorican legend and alum, created her own publishing company. And I thought, well, why not me? And that's when it started. First it was myself, and then I saw other artists touring and not having that same book available for bookstores, and I asked them, "Do you want to," people I love, people that like moved me, and I knew that they needed a book. I asked them, how could I help? And that's how penmanship grew.
So we're sitting here with penmanship, with our European tours, just selling out opera houses. So that's the other side of the thing. What is it like to build and make that when you're a kid who came from California with a dream and established yourself as a professional artist, and more than a decade later looking down that line, what's that journey like for the reality of a creative class person trying to make it in this space now?
I don't say no to anything, and I should say no. But I remember no one listening. I remember people asking me to perform for free. And that was before I started using poetry as a teaching tool. First it was just me on stages. And then I realized poetry can be my life in every facet. So I started teaching poetry workshops. And now, like, one of my most amazing workshops was in a prison in England, right? Teaching group homes, teenage pregnant mothers, in those group home settings, alternative prison programs, high schools where this is their last stop. Publishing was very much a big deal for me, and it doesn't sustain me by any means, but I recognize that it's doing a double work. It's doing the legacy work, and that's fine. I don't mind investing in legacy, but there's a little fear there. There's a lot of awe. I'm amazed. I look back and I'm amazed that I'm here. but there's also so much hope because I have my daughter and I look at her and her artistry. You saw her sing in opera. She sings in 4 languages. She's going to Columbia College, Chicago, for arts management and jazz composition. And I never would have thought that I had given her that strength, but she knows through my work that you have to follow your passion.
Well,
I'm a black poet
that's your legacy too.
who won't be silent.
I
I'm a
refuse
black
to be
poet
silent.
who won't be silent. I have a right to be angry. That doesn't sound like a person who comes from a place of fear.
No. Black Poets Speak Out is an amazing organization that began with Jericho Browne, myself, Amanda Johnston, Sharina Rodriguez, and John Terry Gatson, and all Cave Fellows, just trying to figure out how do we respond with our art to the injustices that plague our community. And when you look at freedom fighters, we were only told that there is one type of way. You have to be on the front line. And what we've learned today, there are many front lines. There are front lines online, there are front lines in print, there are front lines in school, and we wanted to be artists asserting ourselves and making sure that history didn't skew itself, right? Because that's the beautiful thing about history. We think that somebody discovered America. No shade, but a little. What I'm saying is we decided to speak up and for ourselves and for our people. So yes, absolutely. I don't have a right to be tired, and I refuse to be shamed for this anger.
I have to say, the New York Poets Cafe is such a legendary place. When I moved to New York, it is the absolute first place that I went when I got to New York.
Nice.
The very first Thursday, I was like, I gotta go to the New York Poets Cafe. So, how do you feel about hosting events there? And what are you excited about people hearing about your work when you perform on Thursday? Here.
Being a part of the New York Poets Cafe is always an honor. Miguel Agarin built that with his hands 41 years ago. We are lucky it's still there in the time of gentrification. Do you know what I'm saying? It could be McDonald's or it could be, someone's condo, and there's still 300 people lining up to get into that space every Friday night. So it is always an honor. I'm always a little bit like, this feels like a dream. And then, of course, I get over it and start cracking jokes and telling poems. But Thursday, my excitement for Thursday is that it's our last of the season. So I have a couple of guests coming. I have Brotherhood Dance Company, and we have some poetry through movement happening. And we have some Grand Slam champions showing up because they live in Brooklyn, and it's going to be really fly. Beyond the fact the open mic with our own community members will be happening.
Awesome. So just before we get out of here, you spoke a minute ago about having that voice and using that voice. I want to hear just personally what you feel about the role of anger in artistic expression and moving the needle, because we've often seen in whether it's the McDonald's fight we were just talking about or the things that are happening in Baltimore or any number of places before that, how people are angry, but how does that anger translate and move and mobilize and work for the greater good, maybe?
I don't know how it works for the greater good. I know how it works for me. I know how it can work for art, and I know that it is healing, it is cathartic. I know that it is not the all-encompassing healing, but it is the beginning, it's the solve, right? It's the introduction to having some resolve. And it's so necessary for me to do it because I remember holding the anger and being mad at life, being mad every day and not even knowing why. I just knew that I was unhappy. And a lot of that has to do with how anger manifests in our bodies. We hold it in. They tell you about yoga, they tell you the power of meditation. The same thing is about releasing anger. And that is a large part of our bodies that are on display, our bodies that are dismissed and not considered because we hold it in for everyone. And what happens when you start releasing it and being able to, instead of festering, being able to articulate the anger?
Yeah,
then
I think
the change can happen.
Great point, because as we were sort of saying before, it's like you can keep that anger to yourself, or you can release it into the universe. But even in releasing into the universe, it creates dialogue there as well. So thank you so much. Can't wait to see you on Thursday. And for all the Brooklyn poets out there, keep writing and dreaming, and we're going to see you for next season as well.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mahogany. Yeah. The words matter.